Continuing our journey on The Rise, the Limit, we open with Chapter 1, Marriage of Inconvenience. A family's trip to Japan begins not with quiet anticipation, but with the familiar trials of travel, including a rowdy hotel wedding and a compromised door lock. Let's follow our protagonist's observant navigation of airport queues and his pointed commentary on the flight crew that gets them to their destination. Marriage of Inconvenience. Broken doors, guards sleep. Wedding chaos fills the night. Wings bear souls eastward. Isle ascents, minds metamorphoses. Every heroic expedition, I'm told, requires a chronicle. I was forced to create this foundational text myself, a veritable book of Genesis for a journey into the heart of a beautiful contradiction. My quest was for the elegant soul of Japan, but what I discovered is that Japan does not have one soul. It has at least two, locked in a perpetual, magnificent struggle. My odyssey began not with a single step, but with a 14-hour descent in a pressurized aluminum tube, a journey designed by engineers with a deep and abiding contempt for the human knee. This airborne purgatory spat me out into Narita, where I was immediately confronted by a Goma fire purification ritual. Monks chanted in a rhythm that felt impossibly ancient while consecrated wood burned, a smell of cedar and sanctity that seemed to scour the recycled air from my lungs. This was Japan's opening argument, serene, spiritual, and smelling faintly of a divine barbecue. Having achieved a state of calm, usually reserved for moss gardens, I immediately squandered it in a place that proves if you throw enough money at a swamp, you can turn it into a meticulous recreation of Venice, an Arabian coast, and a mysterious island ruled by Jules Verne. This dialogue between extremes became the rhythm of my journey. One day I was plunging into a volcano on a theme park ride, a masterclass in controlled chaos. And the next, I was navigating the grim, silent tunnels of the former Japanese Navy underground headquarters in Okinawa, a gut-wrenching monument to the island's brutal history. This is a land where history isn't just in museums, it's NAILED to the ceiling. In the serene temples of Kyoto, I walked on floors that squeaked like nightingales to betray ninja assassins, only to look up at ceilings repurposed from a fallen castle, stained dark with the blood of samurai who made their last stand in 1600. It is a nation that builds astonishing Gassho-zukuri farmhouses, their roofs like praying hands to shed the crushing weight of snow, and then produces Haida beef, a delicacy so exquisitely marbled it makes the local mountains look plain. Within these pages, that journey is laid bare for you. It is a chronicle intended to foster a deeper appreciation of Japan's intricate heritage, from its ancient Buddhist philosophies to the dramatic era of its great unifiers. But a journey is also measured in practicalities, and this account is filled with invaluable lessons gleaned from the front lines of travel, of deciphering the elegant chaos of the Shinkansen network, of plotting a course through the fantastic worlds of Frozen and Journey to the Center of the Earth, and of discovering that spiritual enlightenment in a temple lodging can be a humbling experience. It is an immersive encounter with the country's stunning natural landscapes, from the subtropical Okinawan islands with their coral limestone and unique pineapples, to the alpine hot springs of Gifu and the glowing wonders of Toyama Bay. Above all, I hope it is a relatable human story about adapting to new environments, overcoming logistical hurdles, and finding moments of profound awe, making the narrative both an informative guide and an engaging companion. It was in a quiet museum at the end of my travels before a painted scroll that the purpose of it all became clear. The scroll depicted the legend of Shuten Doji, a terrifying mythic figure being subdued by a heroic warrior. It felt like a fitting end. This entire trip had been a search for the serene, elegant soul of Japan, yet what I so often found was its glorious, chaotic, and primal energy. The masterpiece, I realized, was not in finding one or the other. It was in seeing them both at the same time, perfectly and fiercely preserved under the same museum glass. This book is the chronicle of that discovery. Terminal Trials, Tattoos, and a Trans-Pacific Trek. We were about to embark on a journey through Japan's deep history and soaring modernity, but our pilgrimage first required a layover in Purgatory, a realm that for the moment was using the alias of College Park, Georgia. Our chosen airport hotel, once a bastion of Southern hospitality, had apparently double-booked itself as a wedding reception venue. I can only assume the nuptial vows included a pledge to love, honor, and cherish, even through the aggrieved howl of a 767 clawing its way into the sky. Our room was located not with any architectural precision, but with the random butter side-down trajectory of a dropped sandwich landing squarely beside the highway. This was a minor concern. The door, however, was a major one. It had at some point developed a profound philosophical objection to the act of locking. The heavy security latch, that swinging metal arm meant to foil assassins and other unwelcome guests, served only as a whimsical decoration. A firm push from the hall was sufficient to defeat it. I convened a family council of war. "These latches are security theater," I proclaimed with the authority of a man who has seen at least 2 spy movies. "They stop nothing. Any villain with a housekeeper's keycard or a crisp $100 bill for the front desk clerk can stride right in." This magnificent oration was lost on our 12-year-old son who, unnerved by the door's open-door policy and the percussive thumping of the wedding party's conga line, declared our bed the only acceptable demilitarized zone. My wife, a pragmatist in a family of theorists, jammed a towel into the latch to foil any wire-slipping scoundrels and then constructed a small, strategic barricade of chairs. My concern was less with the immediate threat of home invasion and more with the cosmic futility of it all. We were present, so property crime was unlikely. A room change was a fever dream, as the wedding party had clearly occupied the premises with the permanence of a conquering army. Complaining about the lock, an artifact that looked as if it had been passed down through generations of indifferent managers, would gain me nothing but a sympathetic shrug. The next guest would simply inherit our small existential puzzle. Welcome to Atlanta. My wife did achieve a fleeting sense of justice by airing her grievance at checkout, a complaint I am certain evaporated the moment our Uber left the parking lot. The College Park experience was precisely what we had paid for. Not good, but close enough to the airport for our 4:30 a.m. departure. We arrived at the WestJet counter a full half-hour before it opened, becoming the humble founders of a queue that soon threatened to achieve its own postal code. Past security, the Delta Lounge was also observing a leisurely schedule, its doors sealed for another hour. We waited. Below our perch, a vending machine glowed like a strange monolith, offering not chips or soda, but Google Pixel watches and phones. The future of retail, it seems, is a brightly lit box in a desolate airport corridor, attended by no one. We eventually boarded, bound for Calgary. The flight was a study in non-events. In the Calgary airport, I paid tribute to Canadian culture by purchasing Smarties and a bag of all-dressed mayonnaise ruffles. In a feat of what I can only describe as Herculean self-control, I strode past both a Tim Hortons and a Rocky Mountain Chocolate Company without stopping. Then it was back into the sky, climbing over the Canadian Rockies on our 787. I will say this for WestJet. They run a far better operation than their American counterparts, particularly regarding food. In business class, I was served salmon and then a beef dish with a surprisingly pleasant miso sauce. The Canadians themselves are a curious species. Their public persona is a distinct object, like a well-made wooden box. It is smooth, functional, and uniformly polite. But if you get a glimpse inside, you find something else entirely. Every one of our flight attendants was professional, efficient, and wearing a crisp uniform. Every single one also had tattoos, some quite extensive. One had a peace wreath inked around a kneecap, another a large paw print on her calf. Our primary attendant displayed 2 impressive sleeves of solid black ink. It was like watching a live-action version of the sitcom Corner Gas, populated by its same brand of distinctly Canadian characters. It wasn't a bad way to fly. For whom the frog tolls. Concrete swallows farms. Ancient frogs cry through the night. Progress bears its cost. Final fields, the farmer's footprint on the flight path. What's the best way to get a feel for a new country? You can learn a lot from the moment you touch down. This was our 4th official introduction to Japan, a customs hall that has now become so packed it felt less like an orderly queue and more like the frantic evacuation of a city that had just spotted Godzilla on the horizon. The crowd was a thick, shuffling organism of wheeled luggage and quiet patience. The officials, realizing their system was about to be swallowed whole, began waving people past an intermediate biometric scanning station, a gesture that seemed helpful. Until you realized the main biometric scan at the passport desk was still very much mandatory. It was a brief dress rehearsal for the main performance of having your face scanned. A 30-minute cab ride finally whisked us away from the terminal and toward our hotel in Narita. As the airport's gleam faded, I started piecing things together. That orderly chaos, the slightly over-engineered security, it all felt like a solution to a problem I couldn't see. It turns out Narita International Airport wasn't so much built as it was forged in a dispute that makes a family argument over Thanksgiving dinner look like a polite debate. Back in the 1960s, Tokyo's main airport, Haneda, was full. So the government decided to build a bigger, better one out in the fields of the Chiba prefecture. This plan was presented to the local farmers with all the tact of a sledgehammer. The farmers, whose families had worked that land for generations, responded by forming one of the most ferocious opposition movements in modern Japanese history. The resulting Sanrizuka struggle was a years-long conflict involving thousands of protesters, riot police, and some seriously delayed construction. They delayed the grand opening for 7 years, a period punctuated by protesters breaking into the control tower and smashing equipment just days before the ribbon-cutting ceremony. You might think that's all just dusty history, a footnote for a plaque nobody reads. But you'd be wrong. The most astonishing part of this story is that some of the farmers never gave in. To this day, there are active farms operating on patches of land completely surrounded by the airport. One sits squarely between the 2 main runways, a defiant patch of green amid a universe of concrete and screaming jet engines. It's a living monument to stubbornness, a place where someone is probably harvesting cabbage while a 747 roars a few hundred feet away. This airport, the pristine gateway to one of the world's most advanced nations, is built around a handful of people who simply refused to move. The 30-year cab ride to the hotel was just long enough to realize that this wasn't just an airport. It was a compromise frozen in asphalt. Nocturnal crooners, the unseen symphony of Narita's frogs. Having learned our airport was practically built on a foundation of pure spite, we figured a little walk was in order. The goal was twofold: find food and fight the crushing gravity of jet lag. A 20-minute shuffle through the damp Narita evening brought us to that universal temple of commerce, a local mall. There, I found salvation in a bowl of pork ramen whose profound goodness was almost suspicious for a food court. With my spirit fortified by noodles, we conducted a brief reconnaissance mission in a grocery store. This is where I truly understood culture shock. The carrots were not merely orange, they were a shade of perfect uniform brightness that suggested they were drawn by animators, not grown in dirt. They looked so cheerful and flavorful I felt a little guilty for planning to eat them. The walk back was a different experience. As the mall's glow faded, the night came alive with a sound that was less a chorus and more an amphibian riot. It was a deafening, all-encompassing wall of noise. It turns out Narita is a major international hub for more than just airplanes. First, there's the sharp, insistent Kero 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 section, which I later learned belongs to the tiny, bright green Japanese tree frog. Then, underneath that, a whole baritone section of Japanese brown frogs lays down a rumbling gua gua gua. Apparently, this city-wide frog concert is a good sign. It means the local ecosystem is thriving, which is reassuring news when you're about to drink the hotel tap water. And the frogs aren't the only locals making their presence known. They are merely the loudest protesters. A few years ago, a tortoise won a standoff with a Boeing 787 by simply existing on a runway, delaying 5 flights and proving that progress can, in fact, be stopped by a sufficiently determined reptile. It seems the spirit of the Sanrizuka struggle lives on, just with more shell and less shouting. Night drizzle falls. 10,000 frogs sing their songs. The city is theirs. The chorus from Narita's paddies serves as an auditory record of what national ambition cannot pave over, the resilience of both a local ecosystem and the community's spirit. It shows that while you can build an airport around a farm, the sound of defiance will still find a way to toll. But what happens when the cold logistics of arrival give way to the ancient heat of a sacred fire? A blessing for the blocked gateway. Narita's old flames card fails, Dad, a brave hero, eels and Disney call. Naritasan Shinshoji, a millennium of faith and fire. To be a traveler is to leave behind the frivolous and the trivial, and to embrace the profound and the essential. I have no idea who said that, but I'm fairly certain they never booked a hotel suite in Narita, Japan. Our room was interesting in the way a poorly planned heist is interesting. I had held on to the belief that I'd secured us a multi-room accommodation. A delusion that evaporated the moment the door swung open to reveal 3 beds lined up side by side like inmates on a cot. My son, with the predatory instinct of a creature claiming new territory, immediately took the middle bed, effectively building a human wall between me and any semblance of personal space. It was fine. Perfectly fine. Sleep was a patchy affair, mostly because we collapsed around 8 o'clock. After waking up several times, I found both myself and my son wide awake at 3:30 a.m., staring at the ceiling. I slipped him some more melatonin, a desperate Hail Mary to the gods of slumber. It failed. By 5 a.m. I gave in and declared it morning. We raided the grocery bag from the night before. I started with a Canadian waffle, a delightful import complete with its own maple syrup packet and crunchy sugar crystals. Less a breakfast food and more a cry for help. I followed it with an apple pie that was structurally a croissant, containing an artfully woven apple filling. For local flavor, the hotel had provided a bean paste treat. It had the distinct flavor and texture of a freshly mulched pine tree. Fueled by sugar and wood pulp, we headed for Narita-san, a sprawling temple complex that guidebooks seem to severely undersell. It's an oasis of 1,000-year-old halls and a garden that could make a statue weep, and it was almost entirely empty. In the main courtyard, a friendly woman approached, eager to practice her English. She told us not to miss the 9 a.m. fire ceremony and then pointed at the grand main hall. It wasn't always there, she explained with the help of faded photographs. The original, built centuries before the invention of decent music, was replaced in the 1950s. They moved the old one by putting it on what must have been the world's largest set of log rollers and just shoving it to an adjacent lot. This seems to be a hallmark of Japan. a casual friendliness that jumps right over any language hurdle, and an engineering philosophy that asks, why demolish when you can just slide it over there? She also told us the temple was built in 940 AD to end a pesky samurai rebellion. The emperor sent a statue of a wrathful deity, Fudo Myoo, to oversee some rituals. Once the rebellion was quashed, the priests tried to take the statue home, but it suddenly became too heavy to lift. They took this as a divine hint that Fudo Myoo rather liked the neighborhood and decided to stay. Thus, the Shinshoji, or New Victory Temple, was born. It later got a boost in popularity when a famous kabuki actor credited the temple for the birth of his son, adopting Naritaya as his stage name, and turning the place into a celebrity hotspot of the Edo period. We also observed another local species, the retired Japanese salaryman. These men wander the grounds alone, armed with camera equipment that costs more than a car, documenting every stone and leaf with the solemn focus of a bomb disposal expert. I imagine they are all secretly competing to see who can fill the world's largest hard drive first. The low, resonant thrum of a drum began to echo from the main hall. Inside, monks in saffron robes were chanting as offerings were cast into a roaring fire. The heat washed over us, smelling of ancient wood and something sacred burning. Flames leaped toward the ceiling, consuming prayers for good fortune, a new car, or maybe just a good night's sleep. Brushing up on Narita's calligraphy, a stroke of tradition. Having spent the morning navigating a temple complex and the surrounding streets thick with the smoke of grilling eel, a visit to a quiet, air-conditioned museum was not an unwelcome proposition. We found the Narita-san Calligraphy Museum tucked away in the park, a building so modern and clean it looked like it had been unwrapped that morning. It was also, quite noticeably, empty. We were the only visitors, a fact that made the echoing silence of its enormous halls feel even bigger. The place was in impeccable condition, which led to the immediate and pressing question, how does a museum with a customer base of 2 maintain such high standards? We later learned it's supported by donations from visitors to the nearby Shinshoji Temple, essentially making it the world's most elegant crowd-funded art gallery. Inside, we peered into glass cases at the tools of the trade. The world of calligraphy, it turns out, is not for the faint of heart or the raccoon of disposition. Some brushes are made from their hair, a fact that makes me see the mischievous masked bandits of my own neighborhood in a new, more artistic light. Other brushes are crafted from delicate bird feathers. There's even a custom of using a newborn baby's first haircut to create a commemorative brush, a gesture that is both touching and, if you think about it too long, slightly macabre. The paper, too, has its own personality. Some sheets were infused with threads of gold, while others had varying levels of absorbency, which apparently gives the black ink a warmer appearance. I was staring at a particularly perfect swirl of ink, a stroke of genius from a long-dead master, when a thought intruded. My own signature, an illegible scrawl that looks like a seismograph reading during an earthquake, is a source of constant suspicion at my bank. Could it ever be considered art? Probably not. It can barely be considered a signature. This, on the other hand, was something else entirely. It was language made beautiful, communication as a visual spectacle. The museum's centerpiece is a thundering reminder of where all this artistry began, a 13-meter-high rubbed copy of a stone inscription from Mount Tai in China. It's the visual equivalent of a patriarch sitting at the head of the dinner table, silently reminding everyone of their origins. From this ancient, robust Chinese style, Japanese calligraphy branched off. The key was the creation of Japan's own phonetic scripts, hiragana and katakana. This allowed artists to blend the strong, architectural Chinese characters with the fluid, almost dancing Japanese script. The result is a conversation on paper, a balance between two distinct visual languages. Every work is then finished with the artist's personal seal, a small red stamp that acts as a final, definitive mark. It is the full stop at the end of a perfect sentence. You might argue that spending an afternoon looking at what is essentially very old, very fancy handwriting is an odd use of vacation time. You would not be entirely wrong. But for someone whose family history is tied to the search for tangible proof of the past, these scrolls were more than just ink and paper. They were an ancestor's journal entry, a signed declaration, a physical link to a moment frozen in time. They were the real thing, preserved not in a forgotten trunk, but here in the quietest art show on earth. Fire, wisdom, and wishes. The enduring Goma ritual at Naritasan. Fresh from the silent halls of the Calligraphy Museum, where the most dramatic event was learning about brushes made from a baby's first haircut. We stepped back into the temple grounds. A deep, rhythmic chanting pulled us toward the great main hall. This must be the fire ceremony the nice woman had told us about. We slid off our shoes, padded across the chilly wooden floor, and found a spot in the growing crowd of observers. In the center of the vast, dim room, a fire roared in a stone altar tended by monks in vibrant saffron robes. The ceremony was less a quiet meditation and more a percussive spiritual tune-up. The monks chanted in a low drone, their voices a human echo to the fire's crackle. Then a sharp, metallic clang would ring out, startling everyone to attention. It felt like a particularly forceful Amen punctuating a sermon delivered in flame and smoke. We saw people near the front holding up purses, wallets, and briefcases. Following their lead, I considered nudging my son's backpack forward to be blessed by the flame of wisdom. I wasn't sure what divine protection a Jansport required, but I figured Fudo's spiritual Guidance might at least help its owner remember to take his gym clothes out of it. Why were we all gathered here, watching priests commit acts of organized arson in a 1,000-year-old wooden building? It turns out this whole production started with a political crisis. Back in 940 AD, a samurai named Taira no Masakado led a rebellion that threw the whole region into chaos. The emperor, presumably out of other options, dispatched a high-ranking monk to perform a fire ritual for 21 days straight, praying to a fierce-looking deity named Fudo Myoo to sort things out. On the last day, the rebellion was crushed, a victory commemorated by the founding of this temple. They've been doing the ritual every day since, which is a remarkable streak of showing up for work. The whole thing is a brilliant piece of symbolism. The fire itself represents the wisdom of Fudo Myoo, who looks less like a gentle guide and more like a celestial bouncer ready to eject you from the premises. His job is to burn away ignorance and earthly desires, which are written down by worshippers on small wooden sticks called gomagi. One by one, these sticks, loaded with the hopes and troubles of ordinary people, were tossed into the flames. It was a very direct form of prayer, sending your requests to the heavens via smoke signal. As the ceremony wound down, the chanting softened and the final clang echoed through the hall. We hoped being in the area was enough to spiritually fortify the backpack, which now was carrying the faint, pleasant scent of sacred smoke. It felt no heavier, but the air around it seemed to hum with a tiny bit more purpose. Fudo Myoo, the immovable guardian of wisdom. Our son's backpack, now fortified by sacred smoke, felt no different, but my mind was certainly fortified with new questions. The entire fiery production we had just witnessed was in honor of one figure, Fudo Myoo, the star of the show. We started seeing him everywhere around the temple grounds, immortalized in stone and bronze. His name apparently means Immovable Wisdom King, which is a heck of a title. He looked less like royalty and more like the angriest personal trainer in the universe, a divine bouncer whose job it is to frog-march your lazy soul toward enlightenment. His face is a masterpiece of divine fury, with a scowl that could curdle milk, bulging eyes, and fangs. The literature says this isn't to scare the faithful, but to terrify evil spirits. I suspect it also terrifies anyone thinking of cutting in line. He's always surrounded by a halo of fire, which represents the fire of wisdom that burns away your impurities. It's a very direct and slightly alarming approach to self-improvement. He is said to be the heavy for Dainichi Nyorai, the chill cosmic Buddha, who evidently outsources the dirty work. Fudo's whole look is a visual instruction manual for his duties. In his right hand, he holds a sword. This isn't for fighting in the traditional sense. It's a sword of wisdom used to slice through ignorance and bad karma. It's the ultimate metaphysical problem solver. In his left hand, he holds a rope, which he uses to snag misbehaving demons and, more charmingly, to pull stubborn people back onto the correct path, a sort of spiritual roadside assistance for the soul. It reminds me of Hercules being tasked with cleaning the Augean stables, except Fudo's job is to clean out the accumulated gunk of the human psyche, a task that seems infinitely messier and likely explains his expression. My son, however, was focused on one thing. He pointed at a statue's sword. "Dad, why's the end of it so fat?" I looked closer. He was right. On many depictions, the tip of the sword looked swollen, almost club-like. It turns out that's not an enlarged tip at ALL. It's a dragon's head, poised to swallow the sword. The story goes that Fudo Myoo got into a philosophical debate that wasn't going anywhere. His opponent transformed into a sword to represent his unshakable argument. Fudo, not to be outdone, transformed into a giant dragon and simply ate the other sword. It is, without question, the most impressive way to win an argument in human history, a complete shutdown of all further discussion. I stared at the little dragon's maw on the bronze blade. Maybe a small replica was the perfect souvenir. It seemed like the ideal tool for settling disputes at home over things like screen time. Beyond the obvious, unveiling the secrets of esoteric Buddhism. My ears were still ringing from the taiko drums, and the scent of purifying smoke clung to my clothes. Having just seen the face of Fudo Myoo, the so-called immovable wisdom king, I was beginning to understand that some forms of faith are for quiet contemplation, and some are for scaring demons out of your soul with fire and fury. His ferocious expression, which I had previously studied in books and statues, made a lot more sense up close. It became clear that there was the Buddhism you read about in pamphlets and the Buddhism you experience in a roaring blaze. This particular brand of intense, sensory-driven faith is called Mikkyo, or esoteric Buddhism. The name translates to secret teachings, which sounds less like a spiritual path and more like a club with a special handshake. The secret part isn't about hiding the truth from people, but about acknowledging that some ideas can't be learned from a book. They have to be experienced directly, which is a polite way of saying you can't just Google your way to enlightenment. In standard, or exoteric, Buddhism, teachings come from the historical Buddha, a man who gave sermons based on Weichu was listening. In esoteric Buddhism, the sermons are broadcast directly from the cosmic source, the Dharmakaya Buddha himself, a being whose very existence is ultimate reality. It's the difference between getting a letter from a respected statesman and getting a direct download from the universe. The main event in this spiritual system is the Three Mysteries, which sounds like a detective series but is actually a demanding form of spiritual multitasking. The goal is to achieve enlightenment by aligning your entire being with the cosmic Buddha all at once. First, you get your body involved with mudras, which are intricate hand gestures that look like a highly advanced form of shadow puppetry. Second, you engage your speech by chanting mantras, sacred sounds that are less about communication and more about vibrating your skull until it's in tune with the divine. And third, you occupy your mind by visualizing deities and meditating on mandalas, which are cosmic diagrams so complex they look like blueprints for a reality I don't have the security clearance for. It's the spiritual equivalent of patting your head, rubbing your belly, and redesigning the cosmos, all at the same time. If that sounds difficult, it is. But the promise is a big one, attaining Buddhahood in this very lifetime. While other Buddhist paths might involve countless eons of rebirth, a sort of slow and steady karmic 401k plan, Mikyo offers the express lane. It's a path forged by masters like Kukai, the monk who established the Shingon school of Buddhism on the remote Mount Koya. He went all in on these secret teachings, believing that all things are just manifestations of the cosmic Buddha. The fire ritual at Narita-san, the fierce face of Fudo-Myo-o, the hypnotic chanting, it was all a live demonstration. It was Mikyo in action, a path where truth isn't just told, but performed. As Kukai himself wrote, "If you wish to know your own mind, you must know the mind of the Buddha." Leaving the quiet grounds of Narita-san Temple felt like stepping from a library straight into a butcher shop. The Zen atmosphere, with its ancient halls and polite photo-snapping retirees, evaporated on the main street. Here the town's real business was on full display. Narita, it turns out, is a town that knows its eels, and it wants you to know it knows, preferably by watching the entire slightly morbid process from start to finish. The air, thick with the sweet smoke of charcoal and caramelizing soy sauce, promised a culinary experience, provided you weren't an eel. We followed the scent, which led us to shop fronts that were more like open-air operating theaters. Behind sheets of glass, men in white coats performed feats of unnerving precision. A live eel, wriggling with an impressive will to live, was plucked from a tub. There was a sharp thwack as its head was pinned to a wooden board with an awl. A single fluid slice opened it from neck to tail. The spine was pulled out with a flick of the wrist and tossed aside. The guts were separated and placed in a neat pile, apparently awaiting their own, different culinary adventure. My son watched, his face a perfect mask of curiosity, unbothered by a scene that would have sent many American children into therapy. This wasn't just lunch, it was a ritual. The most famous preparation is kabayaki, where the deboned eel is skewered and grilled over charcoal, repeatedly basted with a dark, glossy sauce called tar. This is the source of the irresistible smell. It's a tradition that goes back centuries, peaking in an annual event called the Day of the Ox, when the entire nation seemingly decides that the only way to beat the oppressive summer heat is to eat a fish grilled over a blazing fire. The logic is a bit like fighting a flood by opening a fire hydrant, but who am I to argue with centuries of tradition? We saw other preparations listed too. Unadon, which is the eel on a simple bed of rice. Unaju, which is the same thing but served in a fancy lacquered box for people who want their meal to have more social status. There's even a clear soup made from the liver, ensuring no part of the creature's sacrifice is wasted. We found a nearby mall with an eel restaurant, its star performer swimming lazy circles in a tank by the entrance. It offered us only a fleeting glimpse of its tail before retreating behind a plastic rock, a celebrity tired of the public eye. Looking at that lone eel, you'd never guess the absurdly epic journey it had undertaken. Japanese eels don't just hatch in a local stream. They begin their lives as tiny, transparent larvae near a set of underwater mountains in the Pacific, thousands of miles away. They drift for months on ocean currents until they reach the coast of Japan, where they transform into glass eels. From there, they swim up rivers and wriggle through irrigation ditches to spend years growing fat in rice paddies, only to turn around and swim all the way back to their birthplace to spawn and die. It's the most incredible commute in the animal kingdom, and the destination is a grill in Narita. Now you might be thinking it's odd to build a cherished culinary tradition around an animal with a life cycle so complex we can't even breed it properly in captivity. And you'd be right, because the entire industry depends on catching those little glass eels as they arrive from the sea. The Japanese eel is officially listed as endangered. It is a strange paradox. A creature so revered on the plate is being loved to the edge of existence. There was no easy answer to be found on that smoky street, just the sizzle of the grill and the rhythmic work of the knives, a tradition humming along for now. Tokyo Trials, from train tangles to themed tranquility. Having spent the morning contemplating the finer points of esoteric Buddhism and its three mysteries, we were immediately confronted with a new, far more profane trinity of challenges: transportation, technology, and Taco Bell-flavored chicken nuggets. Our first test of faith was figuring out how to get to Disney. A helpful app informed us a taxi would cost nearly $200. The train, it was. This led directly to our second hurdle, my son's Pasmo transit card. My American Pixel phone, a device that prides itself on global connectivity, took one look at a Japanese IC card and treated it with the suspicion of a spy. It would condescendingly check the balance and show our last 20 trips, but flatly refused to perform the simple act of adding money. Defeated, we retraced our steps to the Narita Mall for a tactical retreat into comfort food. I had short ribs and rice, which were excellent. My wife's cold soba noodles, however, looked and apparently tasted like chilled despair. The real culinary mystery belonged to my son, whose spicy McDonald's chicken nuggets came with a slather of jalapeno sauce so aggressive they tasted like something straight out of a Taco Bell test kitchen. Finally, we faced the main boss, the local JR station. After a brief consultation with a tourist information agent and the legendarily helpful JR staff, we were directed toward a formidable black machine. Here, we located the source of all our problems. My son's transit card, purchased when he was an infant in the eyes of the system, had locked itself on his 12th birthday, becoming a useless plastic rectangle. Was I, a grown man, about to be defeated by a child's transit pass? An attendant showed us the correct sequence of buttons, and the machine whirred to life. It performed a sort of digital exorcism, erasing the child icon from the card's memory and printing my son's name in its place. He was now, in the eyes of Japanese public transit, a man. Success felt glorious. The train ride to Disney was smooth, with each station stop announced by its own little jingle. The Disney station, of course, played a chipper instrumental version of Let It Go. The area outside the park was a massive American-style outdoor mall, a Japanese reflection of our own culture, complete with a restaurant that looked like an Outback Steakhouse had a baby with a red lobster. We checked into our Donald Duck-themed room with astonishing ease. Our room was one of the few bargains, a steal compared to the suite down the hall going for about $10,000 a night. The theming was perfect, pristine, and a little intimidating. I found my personal nirvana not in the decor, but in the shower. The water pressure was magnificent. It's an observation I've made before. Japanese bathrooms are built with a deep and profound respect for the act of bathing. They are spacious, they always have a tub, and the water pressure is designed to strip away the grime of not just one day, but possibly your entire lineage. After all that time at the temple focusing on the cleansing power of Fudo Myoo's fire, I'm starting to think these people have it right. They really are people of the water. That brings Chapter 3, A Blessing for the Blocked Gateway, to its conclusion. showing how a single day can bridge the gap between a millennium-old fire ritual and the simple success of fixing a transit card. Next time, an eccentric sushi dinner leads to a surprising look into the biology of the mantis shrimp on the eve of a visit to Tokyo Disney. If you enjoyed this journey, the complete travelogue is available right now as a Kindle book on Amazon, Shinkansen and Sensibility, and if you want to come behind the scenes and get bonus content, you can join my community on Patreon. Thanks for listening to The Rise the Limit.